Hey there, love. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to give you a reminder that I have an Investing 101 course. This is a masterclass to help you grow your wealth through investing. I call it the Investing 101 for Grown-Ass Women. This is specifically geared to help you get onto the road of financial freedom. In over 2 hours of content, you'll gain an understanding of investment strategies and how you can use them to grow your wealth. You will understand different investment types. So you've heard of ETFs, mutual funds, stocks, bonds. What does it all mean? I will teach you, and you will use this to create a diversified portfolio. I will help you develop an investment plan that takes into account your personal goals and values. And then I'll also help you assess what investment platform do you want to use so that you can make a more informed decision based on your personal financial situation and goals. Of course, this applies to you as well as your family. Not only is it 2 hours of content, but I will host office hours where you can ask your questions in advance, and I will answer them for you in community so that other folks can benefit from the answer. I will host these twice a month for 1 hour. You can submit your questions in advance. This will help you really tailor what you learn to your personal financial situation, because all wealth building is a personal exercise. So what are you waiting for? You can go to unbossedwealth.com. That's UNBOSSED wealth.com to sign up. So I am here today with Shanae Brown. She is a leadership coach and founder of No Cream in This Coffee, a career development company working to advance and drive equity for Black women in the workplace. So I know we're going to have a fire conversation because I first want to ask you about the name for your company. Let me say this again, No Cream in This Coffee. Can you give me the background and the meaning behind why you named the company this way?
I wanted to send a message of like the world that I wanted to see going forward. So I started No Cream in This Coffee in 2020, just putting out inspirational content. But I really wanted to send a message that Black women don't have to shrink themselves. We don't have to filter ourselves. We can show up in this world being our bold and most unapologetic selves. So that's what No Cream in This Coffee means, like showing up boldly, being your unapologetic self and not feeling like you have to filter or shrink yourself to appease others.
Yeah. And I like the what it like kind of envisions in my head, the idea of pouring white cream into black coffee, So I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. Me, I like my coffee black, sometimes a little bit of sugar, a little bit of sweetness.
Yes. But I think that symbolizes real life, especially when we think about navigating corporate. We go into these workforces and we have to shrink ourselves. We have to make sure that we're being super polite. We have to make sure that we're walking around warm and approachable. And I feel like that's sort of like adding cream.
Yeah. Diluting yourself, like you said.
Yes.
I can remember so many times when I would just have my regular face on. I like to smile. I do smile, but I do sometimes think that's a reaction to the times when I don't smile and people are like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong? And yeah, to just put on a face or to little dilute yourself in order to be in these spaces sometimes can really wear, especially on black women.
Yeah, it's the permanent smile, so you're not called angry or aggressive.
Exactly. I mean, even from well-meaning family and friends, they give us a lot of advice. Maybe one of them is to smile more. Some of them it's keep your head down, just do the work and don't worry, they'll notice you. In what ways do you think that this is bad advice?
I actually think it's terrible advice. I wouldn't just call it bad. I think that that advice has been passed down from generation to generation, right? And when we look at what's happening in the world and in the workforce, we have boomers in the workforce, we have Gen X, we have millennials, and we have Gen Z. So if we keep passing down this message, and what I love about Gen Z as well as millennials, because Gen Z is not going to get all the credit for shaking up the table. That was millennials first. But what I love about this generation is that we're starting to question some of the things that was passed on. So whether it be in your personal life or your professional life, and when it comes to the advice of keep your head down and work, it's not working. I think if hard work was the key to success, so many of us would be further along. I know so many hardworking Black people. That's not the key. That's not the key, especially when it comes to corporate America at all.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is one of the areas that millennials or even like Gen Z, I mean, I'm a geriatric millennial. I mean, what generation do you belong to?
Millennial.
Millennial. So from your experience, what do you see as the Gen Zs or the millennials, bringing to the workforce that really is better advice than the terrible advice?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like focus on relationships. When we do look at the previous relationships, the previous generation, sorry, they focused more on performance. And I would say if you're Gen Z, you're millennial, or if you're in the workforce period, focus on building relationships and building authentic connections. The reality is that people want to work with those they know, like, and trust, period. So the more you can build those authentic connections, the more you can show up as yourself and not feel that fear of, are they going to like me? Or am I doing too much? Am I going to be perceived a certain way? And trying to people please your way into into the workforce. I think once we stop that, we'll start seeing more people build the right relationships, getting the sponsorship that they need, having the right conversations with their managers about career development. And I think it'll really help change the narrative going forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Have you heard of Carla Harris? Carla Harris?
Yes.
Yeah. I got a chance to see her speak once, and she talked about performance currency versus relationship currency, and that's what you're telling me, I think, in what you're saying. And, just really quickly, she was like, finance, she's in finance, I'm in finance. So she was saying performance currency, you give $1, you get $1 back, right? It holds its value. But relationship currency, you put $1 into relationship currency and it will pay you back $5, as an example. Like, it keeps paying because, to make an investment there, it's not just people who you are working for, but what other people are seeing in you. She's like, first,
Absolutely.
You got to have the performance currency, but
absolutely performance first. You want to give people something to talk about.
Exactly. You want them talking about good things.
Right. Let's be clear.
So in terms of like those, technical skills that you need to perfect, or those performance skills that you need to perfect, what are the other skills that you think? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but what are the other skills if you're an individual contributor to a team and you want to be team leader? What are other things that you need to look at?
I think first, look at how you're leading without formal authority. So you don't need a title to lead. You can lead from where you are. And if you are an individual contributor, are you leading projects? Are you indirectly leading people to complete that project, right? Are you stepping up or stepping outside of your day-to-day to show that you're demonstrating your leadership potential? Maybe you take on, join a task force within your company, join an ERG and sit on that leadership team. There's ways that you can show that you're demonstrating your leadership potential. And another thing that I would say is, I know we talked about relationships, but just being interpersonally savvy is going to change the game for you. Knowing how to communicate with your stakeholders, with senior leaders, with employees across all levels. And I think knowing how to influence people is going to help as well, because if you want to get things done, and if you're somebody who wants to make change or challenge the status quo, you need to be able to influence others and to be able to get that buy-in from those folks.
Mm-hmm. So what has been like your experience with being that individual contributor who thinks that I need to do this because it needs to be done right? And then kind of moving on to, because we got the messages, just do the work, keep your head down, and you will be noticed. And if you're moving now more into persuading and influencing, what are the ways you think you can get out of your own head and take that first step towards developing those other skills?
That's a good question. So developing skills like influencing, I would say you can start by, in your one-on-one meeting, if you're meeting with your manager and you have an idea on how to approach something differently, or you want to implement a new process, you can start in that one-on-one conversation, right? So just start with your manager. Then the next level would be a team meeting, right? So you're presenting your ideas in the team meeting, and then you'll notice that it's like a muscle. So you'll build it up over time and starting to speak up, starting to share. And then once your ideas are, getting the buy-in that it needs, you'll see that it becomes more natural to you.
Because I really think, like, especially as Black women, as Black people, it's hard to like actually, one, speak up, make sure that you're speaking up in certain circles without maybe being labeled as aggressive or being labeled as doing too much. And then to turn around to really think about cataloging everything you've done and then touting it, showing it to your manager and what you've been doing. So maybe just before I go on to like maybe thinking about how do you tout your accomplishments, I just want to dig a little bit deeper into building that relationship, and building that that muscle to give feedback. You talked a little bit about in your one-on-one with your manager. How can we ensure that we have really good relationships with our manager and that we are persuading them and influencing them?
Yeah, I think it starts with, like with any relationship, you have to start to build trust. And that trust comes from genuinely getting to know people. So if you're in a conversation with your manager, you may want to ask them more personal things to get to know them. I think that really helps build rapport. Also, repetition. So you have to have some sort of consistent cadence with your manager. If you're just meeting with your manager once every 3 months, it's going to be very hard to build that relationship and build that rapport and really get to know each other genuinely. But if you have a weekly or biweekly cadence, I think it's much easier to establish that rapport. Another thing is if you're working in the office, maybe getting your manager offsite, going for a walk. I've done that with my manager too. So we can just talk about things like coworkers, but also like friends, right? Talking about, oh, here's what I'm doing this weekend. Here's what I have planned, and having the conversations outside of work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been a leader in the past, and when you really connect with someone besides just the work, I think they enter your mind. You see them more favorably. You see them more positively. It really makes you take their suggestions on a more, authentic, a more, okay, this person's really thinking about this kind of level. So I think that's really important to nurture those relationships.
Yeah. And understand that it takes time.
It does take time. Yeah, it definitely does take time.
Because I know I don't trust everybody I first meet.
And why do you think that is? Why is that?
I think people have different ways of approaching relationships. I think, especially when it comes to trust, I think some people approach it in terms of, I'll trust you until you give me a reason not to. And I think within the Black community, many of us approach it in terms of, I don't know if I can trust you until you prove that I can trust you. And I mean, and that's a natural response. So many of us have been mistreated in the workplace, I'm sure if you talk to any Black woman, she'll tell you about a story of being mistreated, working in a toxic environment and feeling like she couldn't trust folks. So me coming in, I don't come in with an armor, and I don't encourage my clients to come in with that armor. In fact, we actually try to rip the armor a piece, right? So that way we can show up as who we are and connect with people as individuals, but I can't blindly trust anyone I first meet. It's just
Yeah.
not how I'm wired.
Yeah, I know. And I think there sometimes needs to be an appreciation that I'm not wired that way either. I think I will trust you, but verify. But no, this is not the first time I'm meeting you. Like, because I did some research, you know what I mean? Like, so you're already coming in with like some, sometimes they're preconceived, but sometimes I like to think it's intuition more than anything, particularly as a Black woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at times when you do develop that relationship, I'm wondering what you're thinking about. I don't know who said this the other day, particularly around Black women who always have their armor up because society really puts us in that position. Sometimes you do a lot of fighting to get in the room that you forget that once you're in the room, you should stop fighting.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, I think that once you get in the room and you're in the door, there's probably still, because you're conditioned to fight, I could see how someone coming in and like, okay, I've made it to this position. But just because you're at the top and you have your seat at the table, it doesn't necessarily mean that they always welcome you.
True.
And I don't know if you, I think I saw you post something about it. It was Bozoma St. John sharing her story about being in the C-suite. And yeah, like she still had to fight. She still had to advocate for herself. Yeah. So it doesn't matter, like just because you get to that C-suite position, I think the fight still has to happen, but you just probably have to be a little more strategic with it and probably got a lot more to lose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the way the fight happens is a little bit different. I myself have had some challenges being in senior leadership and having really like disparaging types of interactions with other people on teams. But I would also say at the same time, like if you end up in an environment because you are leveraging your worth, you are moving when the table's no longer serving you, you end up at a table that is serving you and serving you off the menu. So some of those skills now that you're flexing are going to be new skills, right? So, and some of them don't involve, fighting.
Nobody wants to go to work and fight.
Nobody wants to go to work and fight. No, definitely not, And I think one of the ways you really get to those tables is to tout your own accomplishments, Yeah. And I think this could be really difficult for a lot of women, particularly Black women. What are some of the ways you can give advice to someone who has a hard time touting their own accomplishments, particularly in writing that performance review?
Yeah, so we have a hard time talking about ourselves, but it's much easier to praise someone else. So one of the ways that you can do that if you're writing like your self-evaluation during performance review time is to imagine that you were talking about your favorite brand or, recommending your favorite eyebrow lady. I know like Black women don't let anybody touch their eyebrows, right? You have to have that trusted person who, you like, and you trust to be able to pluck those and wax those eyebrows. So I think it's important.
Must say that is a very great analogy because I have to pencil in my eyebrows after too much waxing, too much plucking, but anyways.
It's okay. But it's so true, right? When you find a good eyebrow person, you're like, oh, that was so good. And you recommend that person who you like to others because you trust them. So it's the same thing with you. Like it's not your favorite brand, but it's your professional brand, which should be your favorite brand, to be honest. So when you are writing your performance evaluation, like think about it from that perspective. Like what would I say to a friend who I was sharing, who I was making a recommendation to, right? So I was referring them to my eyebrow lady. You would be honest. You would let them know, oh my gosh, this is the best person ever and why.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll also probably say, oh, here's what you would look out for. So it's the same thing with your performance evaluation, because you're going to talk about your accomplishments, but then you're also going to say, okay, so here's the development areas as well. And I think being honest with yourself about what you've accomplished as well as where you need to develop will show your manager, like, this person is self-aware, and back it up with data, right? So don't just say, oh, this eyebrow person is the best. You say they're the best because, I was in and out. It only took me 5 minutes to get these eyebrows done, and I came out looking flawless, right? So back it up with data. That way it's easier for your manager to buy into that because you have the data to back it up. And please do not leave your performance evaluation up to your manager to just come up with what they say, because we all know that some of the feedback that we receive isn't always accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many things you said there that I want to go a little bit deeper in. One of the ones, I'll start with the last one because I can't remember the first one. But in the last one, like, don't leave it up to your manager to write your feedback. And I also would say to that, don't leave it till the end of the year in order to tout how well you're doing and to collect data on that performance review. Like, I think if anything is on that performance review and it's a surprise, like, it's new things, no, none of that stuff should be new.
I agree. And I always recommend keep a brag sheet. So anytime you cross off a goal, you accomplish something, you got some really great feedback about a presentation, about a project, update your brag sheet. Mm-hmm. Update it. And I would recommend updating it in the moment or at least quarterly. So you're tracking what's happening, what you've accomplished, what you've learned throughout the year.
Yeah. So much is like, if someone writes you an email, hey, you did a really great job on this. One of the ways you could just like forward it to another email address, like maybe within your company, depending on what else is in there. But, take a note of it. What were the results? What were the actions? And like write it all down so that you have that prepared.
And save it to a folder.
Save it to a folder. Exactly. And so that even the next time you're talking to your manager, you mention it that time. So it's not a surprise when it shows up in your performance review. I think you got to give a lot of managers grace, particularly if they are good managers, that they got other stuff going on. So they're not going to remember. It's not that they, don't think you're doing a good job. They just need that reminder,
Yeah. And if a manager is leading a team of 10, they're not going to remember what you did in January of 2023 when it's time to write your performance review in December. They're just not.
They're just not. Yeah. Yeah. And don't feel bad about that. Yeah. Like, please give them some grace.
But this is why you need to keep track of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked a little bit about giving like specifics and like, detailing, not just that they did a good job, but it only took them 5 minutes. They use the best skills and tools and, really detail how that turned out. What do you think are some of the areas that people forget to talk about on their performance review that could really tout their accomplishments?
I think people focus on the activities as opposed to the impact. And what I mean by that, like, let's say you are an executive assistant, right? So you may say, oh, I scheduled a bunch of meetings for the leader that I'm supporting, managed travel, but don't really talk about the impact of that. So I remember I was working with an executive assistant, and we were talking about how to prepare for the performance review, right? How to articulate that. And when I was like, you're really a relationship broker, because if you, as the executive assistant, are not building that relationship with another C-suite executive assistant, your principals or your senior leaders cannot do their job effectively. So I need you to start thinking about the level of impact that you're adding to this company.
I love that. I love that relationship broker because there's some people who give you a call and you look at the phone and you're like, I'm not picking that up.
Right.
But then there's other people who are like, oh, okay, what do they need? Yeah, and that's the impact of all the other activities that you've been doing in order to make that happen. And it goes back to relationships, like you were talking.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in building relationships with the executive assistants for the leaders that I supported. So I come from a background in HR. And in order to do my job effectively, me and the executive assistant need to be BFFs. And most times it's happened naturally, but it has been a game changer because I can get on the calendar easily.
Easily. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. I love that analogy. I love that. And that's also just really why you really need to build relationships. Another question on the performance review. What about writing we versus I in terms of accomplishments? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I personally would write I. I can't say what everyone else would do. But if it's not a team goal and it's an individual performance goal, I'm talking about me and what did I do, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm being assessed on a team activity, then I'm going to talk about we. But if I'm being assessed on my individual performance, and most times you are, so when you're handing out bonuses, they're not saying, hey, here's $20,000 for you to split with the team, right?
Right.
They're assessing you on your individual performance. So I probably will focus on me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that because I think some of us get caught up in the trap of not seeing as being ambitious, that we might dilute ourselves and say, well, it was we. But I really do think that if you want to advance, you do need to get really comfortable in talking about I and how you contributed to the results and the impact that you're having.
Yeah. And just because you're talking about yourself in that moment doesn't make you less of a team player.
Yeah. And I think I
think we have to separate that.
We definitely do. And a lot of the times I don't necessarily think it's the person who wants to write it's the audience that's receiving it and how they perceive Black women. Because in my particular instance, like I said, I prefer my coffee black, sometimes with a little bit of sugar. But if the coffee is nice, I don't need no sugar,
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that translated in the workplace. I was speaking up at meetings. I was going after promotions. I was cultivating my teams and making sure that not only was I advancing, but they had opportunities to advance as well, too. And it really got me in the mode where I really didn't need that much approval, particularly from my manager, cultivated trust, established on results. However, with peers, in doing like 360s, one of them in particular was basically gave me the feedback that I was, in coded language, too aggressive, and it was not a good scene, and, this is obviously a stereotype, like literally a stereotype, not only a woman who is succeeding, but a Black woman is that. And this particular gentleman, he was, he's white, but I guess Italian in background. And just the stereotype that he was labeling me as, I took it to heart, and, I'm just wondering about how do we, in the spirit of fighting, address these stereotypes in the workplace?
I think my answer to this question is it's going to be a little surprising because I personally feel like we don't need to fight it. And the reason why I say that is because we have fought so much. And right now, I think I am at the point personally of accepting if someone is committed to misunderstanding me, that's just what it's going to be. Mm. So I think it causes a lot of extra work for us to come into the workforce and try to convince other people, like, please don't see me how you see everyone else. That's exhausting as hell. And I don't know if I could say that on this podcast, but
No, you can. Go ahead.
but that is exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. It's exhausting.
It's extra work. And I would encourage anyone listening to just free yourself of that burden. You cannot manage anyone's expectations of you. There are 7 billion people in this world, and trying to control how everyone sees you, you're going to exhaust yourself, period. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we can fight it, but in the moments where we are being called aggressive, address it, ask clarifying questions. What did you mean by that? What did you observe to make you feel that way? And I think when we start pushing back a little, as opposed to internalizing it, you know how like if you ask somebody a question and they know they messed up, right? Like somebody's like, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. You'll start to get more of that. And I think it'll stop.
Yeah.
Once we start challenging these thoughts, start challenging the feedback, asking these clarifying questions, and I think we'll see people start to be a little more responsible with their words.
Yeah, I think the key is if I could go back in time, and when I asked him about some of the comments he had put, one of them was around, if someone from my team goes to speak to you, we fear that you might say no. Like it was a fear that I might say no. And I said, well, that was the answer to my why do you feel that way? And at the time, I just kind of wrote it down, but I think in retrospect, I should have just asked, well, why? Why? And like literally just keep asking why, because it was just really, really strange. It was like, well, if it's in my world and what you're planning to do doesn't make sense, we've looked at the risks. What would be wrong if I said no? Like,
right.
Why? Like it just, it was very interesting. Different time and different place,
Yeah. And I think the more we also realize that people are just projecting their own shit onto us, like we can start to free ourselves from the pressure of trying not to live up to a certain stereotype, because that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like that. People do project their own thoughts, their own opinions on you, basically not even having met you or not even having known you. They don't really have that relationship, the ones that we're talking about earlier. Hi, love. I hope you've been enjoying this episode. I just wanted to take a little pause to remind you that you can sign up for the Investing for Grown-Ass Women Masterclass. In over 2 hours, you will get on the road to building financial freedom. You'll gain an understanding of investment strategies, different investment types, develop an investment plan, and assess the investment platforms out there so that you can make an informed decision based on your personal financial situation and goals. Plus, with over 2 hours of office hours where you can ask your targeted questions to really help you tailor all of the information to your personal situation, you really can't lose. Sign up at unbossedwealth.com. That's unbossedwealth.com. Recent studies show that Black women in particular are very, very ambitious. Although in this ambition, we still only represent around 1% of C-suite positions. How do you think, it's the companies, how do you think companies can create environments for Black women to rise, and how can we feel supported that we will eventually get there to those more and more Black women in the C-suite?
I think first, educating employees on the unique barriers that Black women face in the workplace. So I know when I speak at companies or I'm doing like workshops and trainings, one of the things that I intentionally do is use examples of how some of the career development techniques and strategies that I'm talking about impacts Black women. So I always center the Black employee experience to make sure that I am planting a seed to educate that company on what it's like to navigate the workforce as a Black woman. So I think first we need to start having these conversations about What are these unique barriers? So like lack of support, lack of sponsorship, right? So you can speak to plenty of Black women and you'll hear that I don't have the support that I need from my manager. I'm not receiving any direction. My manager doesn't give me feedback. So we know these things. Now it's the company's job to do something about it. So then I would say start equipping your leaders with tools and training and coaching on how to lead effectively. Because we're never going to change the system if everyone is operating the same.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about sponsorship as being one of the barriers, and in the sponsorship, not getting feedback, not getting direct, detailed advice, or getting advice that is just like very wishy-washy. It has nothing to do with like performance. Is there any other particular challenges that you've seen, particularly for Black women in the workplace, that is hampering their advancement?
I would say so. Those are more so on the at an organizational level, right? So
I think we could stay at the organizational level. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of organizational level, I would say compensation, right? So not paying Black women equitably. But I also just want to mention on a personal level how we show up to these rooms, how we show up, because a lot of us want change and we're depending on our organizations to provide that change. But it's a two-way street. We can't keep doing the same thing. We can't keep being afraid to take up space or to talk about our accomplishments or to give feedback. We have to show up differently as well. Because I feel like when we show people how to value us, that's when we'll start to see the change. Like I have clients who have come to me nervous to advocate for themselves or to speak up. After we go through coaching, one of my clients got a 23% increase just by having the guts to say, yeah, I know I've been doing all this work and here's how I impacted the company. Here's what I expect moving forward, right? And that's a bold move, which a lot of people, it may make a lot of people uncomfortable, but I really try to work with women to get out of their own way so that way we can make those bold moves. We can show up powerfully in our roles. We can show up unapologetically and demanding the respect that we actually deserve.
Yeah, I love that, because in my experience too, like my direct experience, I really got really comfortable in talking about my performance, talking about the results that I'm delivering, and also kind of practicing what would be the most likely response that I would get, and then what would be my response to that, as well as two other scenarios. What would be a really greater than I ever thought it was going to be, that most likely, as well as, what would be a low point. And again, like kind of sketching out like what would be my response in order to be prepared,
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of women want to even think about that for asking that first question, like preparing themselves for asking that first question, when it's not just the first question. It's like, what's the next thing you're going to say? What's the next thing that you're going to respond with?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do if like a woman is negotiating an offer or looking for a raise, we'll have a strategy session. And part of that strategy session is coming up with responses for common objections. And it is a game changer, because the goal of, you advocating for that raise or getting that promotion, it may not happen immediately, but you do want a commitment from your manager. And sometimes managers say, oh, I'll look into it. So we have to be able to respond to that and say, okay, when can I follow up on this? Or when would you like to regroup on this? So having those responses to those key objections would really help women get more comfortable and just anticipating, like you said, what's the best thing that could happen, but also what's the worst that could happen.
Yeah. And like, based on what you know of, you've worked with this manager, you have a sense of what those objections are going to be, right?
Yep.
And be prepared for them. And I like what you said about, getting out of there with a commitment. It might not be a commitment for today, might not be a commitment for tomorrow, but when can we put this in the calendar? I'm wondering about what happens when that date that's put in the calendar, it comes and it's like, well, let's think about this even later. I get the sense that a lot of Black women in particular that I talk to, I always tell them, like, you are too loyal. You are too loyal. Like when is that? I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait to see what happens. When is that, like, no, it's a time to kind of make a shift. It's time to make a move.
I think it depends on the relationship that you have with your manager. Because I had a friend who her manager had pretty much promised her a promotion, let's say the promotion in like August. And then the manager came back and said, it's going to happen in January. And she was like, literally, like, really, January? This is like, it was supposed to happen months ago. And I was like, based on everything that you shared about your manager, I think she's going to look out for you. So I would trust that. She ended up getting more money in January than what she would have in August.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on the relationship that you have with your manager, but also the timing, because budget may be exhausted in August. Give me the promotion when the budget is fresh. I would wait for that. So think about your company's cycle, like your promotion cycle as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just weigh the options, because it may not be a bad thing to wait.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, as long as you're getting compensated.
Exactly.
As long as you're getting compensated for that wait.
Yeah. And I think it depends on like your style too, like, or what's important to you. Because I know someone would say, I'm not waiting. I'm gonna find another job and leave, or I'm gonna find someone to counter offer and then present that to the manager. Whatever works for you. I also just want to point out that it's not always a bad thing to wait for your moment.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I really think that's being loyal to people who deserve that loyalty, like, so
Yeah.
in that analysis, yeah, she trusted her manager. You got her to see that this manager is trying to make things happen for her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's loyalty is not misplaced, but
right. But if you don't trust your manager, then you may want to start doing other things. You may
want to start. Yeah. Just start looking. And speaking of starting things, you have something called the Healing Hour. Can you tell me about what that is and why did you start it?
Yeah, so the Healing Hour is a community conversation where we get together and talk about the experiences and challenges that Black women face in the workplace. So some of the barriers that we were talking about, like lack of sponsorship, support, imposter syndrome, all the things, like really having these open and honest conversations about what it is to be Black in the workforce. And the reason why I started it was because so many of us are the onlys. We can't talk about certain things with our peers or sometimes even our family members. Because I know I've worked with clients and they're like, my family keeps telling me, well, girl, you got a good job. Like, it's nothing to complain about.
Just suck it up, like they're paying you that money, you keep your mouth shut.
You know how many people would kill to be in this, but like we hear all these things from our family members, and people always don't understand what it's like to be a Black woman in corporate.
Yeah.
So I started the Healing Hour to create that safe space for us to share what we're going through, talk about these things, but then also, okay, we're not going to stay stuck. We're not going to, stay down. Like, how do we overcome it? And share tips, share different techniques, but really give Black women a safe space to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, because if you're the only one in your organization, no one to talk to. And at home, they're telling you, you know, I don't know why you're making good money. That's don't rock the boat kind of a thing, you
Why
know?
would you ever want to leave that? You got good benefits.
Yeah, you know? So to have a place where you can talk through these things, I think is so important. I think even more and more we're focusing on mental health and destigmatizing a lot of, you know, mental health issues. And it's not about a mental deficiency. You don't want to get there. You want to be healthy. You want to talk about these things. You want to get these things instead of being bottled in, talked about and addressed.
Yes. And also feel like, oh, wow, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's other people going through this too. And I think that's what the Healing Hour represents because it's such a shared experience. I mean, it's kind of sad when you think about it. Like, damn, so many Black women go through the same thing. It's kind of sad, but when you are doing it in community, it feels more empowering. Like, oh, I heard this person dealt with it, and this is how they handled that situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It gives you more courage to say, you know what? Maybe I can have that conversation with my manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, in community, it is empowering. It'll get you to move
Yeah,
forward on some of the things that you want to do, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I had a conversation with someone recently, and because we had the Healing Hour last week. And it happens every month, but we had it last week, and someone was sharing, like, I felt seen.
Yeah,
I felt so seen in that moment.
yeah.
So it's really good. So if anyone's listening, definitely sign up for the Healing Hour.
So yeah, I'm going to drop the link to signing up for the Healing Hour in the show notes. You'll have it on the website page, and definitely look into it because yeah, we need that community. We definitely need that community because more than ever, I was looking at like tons of articles, you know, saying that Black women are starting more businesses than ever before, but it's because a lot of them are exiting the workforce because of a lot of the things that we've been talking about here and turning to entrepreneurship. Um, Maybe share a little bit about your story and also talk about what skills can you take from work if you want to make a smooth transition into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think learning the business that you're working in, not just your department, but I think not in just entrepreneurship. I think it's actually going to help you be a better employee when you know the business, understand how the departments work together, and understand how your company makes money. I think that is going to set you up to be a really great business owner. Um, in terms of transitioning, so I'm a pretty organized person. I kept I keep a same sort of schedule. It's not a 9 to 5. It's more like a 10 to 3, 10 to 4. But I keep a schedule, and no one is on my back to like schedule meetings or I got to show up. So I think being disciplined in that really helps as well. Um, Also, this is gonna sound so simple, but taking lunch, like making sure that you're not just working. You don't want to come out of your 9 to 5 and then go into entrepreneurship feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, feeling burnt out. So making sure that you're taking breaks as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you could easily get burned out and swamped when, especially when it's one or the other, right? You can get swamped just working all the time. You forget to eat, you forget to sleep well, exercise, all that kind of stuff where you're like, I'm going to do this as a part of, you know, being successful in my day job. But now that you're working on your own, it might kind of fall to the wayside.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the day because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I have to do this, because the company's not established yet.
Mm-hmm.
You have to establish the company. So
Yeah,
you're putting in so much effort, so much energy. And before you know it, it's like it's 10 o'clock at night. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't eat.
I didn't eat. Yeah. And the opposite too, right? Like I like that you talked about like scheduling your day, like being organized, still treating it like this is a job, you know, the hours are 10 to 3, 10 to 4. This is when we work, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's important too, because sometimes you can, whether or not it's like a 10 to 4 or a 12 noon to 8 or something, like
Yeah.
organizing it so that you've established, okay, this is when we work and this is what it is.
Yeah. And doing it, organizing your day around the times you feel most productive. So I have like a work block from 10 to 12:30 where I don't take meetings because I know that is my time to strategize and to execute. So I'm really good in the mornings. Like I wake up super early. Anything after 4 p.m., it's just not going to happen. It's going to have to wait till the next day. So I don't, if I need to concentrate, I'm not scheduling anything at that time.
Yeah. Me, I'm a late person. Like, so I probably would be like a 10 to 6.
Okay.
You know? I'm like a 10 to 6 kind of a person. But some days I'm like, it's like I've had dinner, but like inspiration just kind of hits me late, you know?
Yes,
And I'll
yes.
just like go do some stuff. And I keep my Mondays as my CEO day. So
Okay.
no client meetings on Monday. We review the numbers, whether they be, analytics, whether they be dollars, whether it's, okay, how do I want to think about what I want to talk about next month and how should it be marketed? Yeah, I keep my Mondays for working on the business as opposed to being in the business.
Oh, that's awesome. I think my day is Friday, so I don't have,
Friday.
yeah, because I can wrap up, I can reflect, and then head into the new week. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So can you tell us a little bit about, why you started this business? Because you used to be an employee, right? Climbing the ranks, and
Yeah.
now a business owner.
Yeah. So I started No Cream in This Coffee. And honestly, I did not have a plan when I started it. So please do not take business advice from me at that time, because I started it with an idea. I said, I need to do something that integrates personal and professional development. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen within a Black community. And there's also skills that we need to learn in terms of soft skills, but more so from a place of not teaching us how to be more like white men, if that makes sense.
No,
I'm like,
I hear you.
I'm like, how do we do it in our way and in a way that's going to work for us, in a way that's going to advance us, but not cause more stress? So that was my idea. And literally woke up one day, I think it was like March 18th, and I couldn't concentrate. I was like, oh, I'm going to take this far. And the decision was made for me because I was
Sometimes,
like,
yeah,
I was like, it's going to happen today.
sorry. Sorry, say that again. Say that again, and I'll edit it around it.
Oh, I was going to say the decision was made. It was made for me because I woke up that day and I couldn't concentrate on anything else. And I felt like there was, like, I kept hearing a voice like, do it, do it. And the year before, so in 2020, I had already had this idea to leave my job and to do something around personal and professional development for Black women. In 2021, so it's like March 18th, it's in the morning, I'm texting my boyfriend and I'm like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. I think I need to do something different. I think I need to go for it. And I was like, I don't know when. And then I couldn't concentrate the full day. And then I just kept hearing like, do it, do it, do it. And I started shaking because I'm usually the type of person like, okay, let me sleep on this. Something's going on. Something's not right. Okay. The fact that I can't get any work done. And so from 8 p.m. to like 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. At 2 p.m., I slacked my manager. I said, hey, can we talk?
Ooh, must have got that message.
I said,
Okay.
hey, can we talk? She was so surprised. She was like, I didn't expect this. I was like, yeah, neither did I when I woke up this morning. I didn't expect it, but I felt like I was being called to do something that was going to empower Black women. And what had happened a couple years ago when I was working, it was a pivotal moment that I really feel like shifted the way I saw myself and the way I wanted other women to see themselves. So we had this receptionist, and she used to wear her hair. She used to have like a head tie, it was a protective style, right? So she had a head tie. And because I was in HR, a manager wanted to speak to me about how to have a conversation with her about taking off her head tie.
Mm.
And I was so triggered.
Wow.
I was so triggered because I'm like, this has nothing to do with her performance.
Yep. Yeah. It's just what you think looks professional, not anything other than that. Like, ooh.
So when I had the conversation with the manager and I'm getting all the details of like, what's the issue? The manager said something that stood out to me and was like, well, I come to work every day. I would never come to work with my dark circles showing or my without makeup. And I was like, okay, so you're projecting your standards onto someone else. This has nothing to do with the job. So because I am in HR, I pretty much told her if a man was in a position, you would not tell a man to do anything with his hair or to wear makeup. So
or to
we
lose
shouldn't
his
be
belly.
we shouldn't be having this conversation.
Or wear a toupee or something.
Right? We would not be having this conversation if a man was in that position. And I think because the receptionist was a Black woman, I felt so triggered. And I remember going to my manager and I said, are we really having this conversation right now? And then my manager was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was like, this woman, because I was fuming. But from that moment, I was like, what if there was an HR person who tried to go along with this because they didn't want to shake the table and said, well, let's find a way to make this woman take off her head tie.
Yep.
Let's find a way to make this manager happy. And I think sometimes when things happen, I always say, like, when we see Walmart doing, Juneteenth decorations and things like that, the first thing people say is, well, they didn't have anybody Black in the room. And sometimes somebody Black is in the room. They're just afraid to speak up.
Exactly. There's somebody Black in the room, but they're afraid to go against the grain, because of whatever reason. It's not their issue. It's the issue of being in a room in a corporate environment where it is not inclusive. Like they just want you there for the diversity as opposed to the inclusion, And always an assumption that you have the same views as them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I always go back to that because there probably is that one Black person in the room. I know I was like the one Black person on the team. So I know how difficult it is to say, this ain't right. We should try a different approach. And I think that's also something I'm very skilled in. Like on my performance reviews, it always says Shanae challenges us to think differently. So I'm like, okay, this is clearly something I'm very skilled in. And I wanted to equip other women with these tools, with these strategies to do the same.
Yeah.
So that way we could advocate for things. That way we can also be put in positions of power, of influence, the decision makers. I need more Black women in positions of power and influence.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many times I have talked to so many Black women, and one of the catalysts was showing up with their hair at work. Like if you go back to the roots of why they were having an uncomfortable conversation or why they decided to leave, like so much of it is like, you know what? I was showing up with my natural hair, And it's just really interesting because a lot of times it's other women,
Yeah.
I don't know. So I've been really enjoying this conversation.
Same.
This has been really amazing, but we're coming to the top of the hour. And I wanted to ask you, where can folks connect with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me as Shanae Brown. I'm on Instagram at No Cream in This Coffee. And you can also check out nocreaminthiscoffee.com to find out more information about coaching, how I work with clients, as well as the Healing Hour.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm going to drop all those links in the show notes. So just click. It's easy. It's easy. So I got one last question for you. It's just a one-word answer, and it's for you to complete this sentence. To me, wealth is
healing.
Healing. I love it. Thank you so much, Shanae. This has been wonderful.
Of course. Thank you.
This has been another episode of the No Boss of Me podcast. I'm Leanne Hanaway, money coach, wealth educator, and chartered professional accountant. If you have feedback on today's episode, don't forget to rate us and review us wherever you get your podcast. You can also DM us on Instagram at No Boss of Me. We'd love to hear from you. Please join us again next time for more on investing to build wealth, navigating personal finance, and talking to women entrepreneurs who are changing our world with confidence. Thanks for listening.